fellow Ag Nerd. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of the Future of Agriculture. My name is Tim Hamrich, and every week you and I get to hear from the founders, farmers, innovators, and investors, the people shaping the future of the ag industry. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I had the chance to attend FIRA USA, which is the gathering for ag robotics and autonomous equipment in agriculture. And autonomy in general has been on my mind a ton, especially lately. You've seen an uptick this past year in autonomy-related episodes featuring companies like Verdant Robotics, Carbon Robotics, and Sabanto, all on different episodes. One of the big reasons for this is I'm certainly getting the sense that many of these solutions are starting to reach some sort of tipping point from quote unquote, wouldn't it be cool if, to more of like, this is actually being purchased and being used and finding value on commercial farms. And that's really exciting. We've done this podcast for 8 years, and some solutions have showed a lot of promise and never gone anywhere. And so you just kind of never know what's going to go from interesting idea about the future of agriculture to, no, this is actually a really valuable part of the present day agriculture. So while I was at the event at FIRA USA in Woodland, California, I recorded about a dozen or so conversations and asked some of the questions that I have about what I'm choosing to call the ag robotics revolution, because I need a grandiose title for this episode. So just bear with me on that one. But you're going to hear today from 4 different founders who were at FIRA USA to feature their technology. And those founders are Andrew Bate of SwarmFarm Robotics, Steve Saunders of Robotics Plus, Ben Alfi of BlueWhite, and Tim Bucher of AgTonomy. I should, though, mention that Tim's interview didn't actually happen at FIRA USA. It happened early this year, back in January, for a series of radio reports I did on his company and some of the big announcements they had. But it really does fit this episode, and he was at the event. I just happened to miss him, so I wanted to include him here. That said, I settled on these 4 to feature for this first FIRA recap episode for a few reasons. First, they all have some sort of focus on fully automating the power unit of the farm, aka the tractor. Although this isn't their exclusive focus, as you're going to hear, they are all taking sort of different approaches to this central power unit, the Swiss Army knife, if you will, of the farm, the tractor. Also, they are each originally from different countries, which I think is kind of cool and really reflects the global effort of this industry and the different perspectives that come with that. Andrew Bate at SwarmFarm is from Australia, Steve Saunders at Robotics Plus from New Zealand, Ben Alfi at BlueWhite from Israel, and Tim at AgTonomy from here in the US and California. Also, they represent the type of people that seem to be leading this effort, in that they're not exactly young. No offense, guys, Silicon Valley type of entrepreneurs that are just out to go disrupt the world and turn everything upside down and want to become, billionaires someday. These are accomplished entrepreneurs and businessmen in their own right, many of them farming, who don't seem to be doing it because they want or need the money or want the fame or esteem. They really just seem to have a passion for the technology and the change it can bring to the future of agriculture, which are my type of people, the people I like talking to. This to me is at the core of what made the people I interviewed at FIRA USA different from a lot of other ag tech events I've been to. Well, that, and then also the field demonstrations, which I found really, really cool. They even had kind of little makeshift fake orchards and fake vineyards so that you could see the technology in action. So very, very cool to have that element of hands-on demonstration as well. I'll tell you more about each of the guests as we go throughout the episode today and share some of my thoughts about robotics and the event as well. But overall, through these 4 interviews, we had the chance to cover 5 of the big questions I have about farm robotics. And I'm going to outline those questions here, and then we'll follow that as sort of the framework for today's episode. The first is simply, has the ag robotics revolution really arrived? Secondly, what's driving the push and the progress of these solutions? Third, does this technology really solve the much talked about, quote unquote, ag labor problem? Fourth, will farmers actually adopt and pay for this technology? And fifth, what comes next for ag robotics? So let's just dive right in here to the first one. Has the ag robotics revolution actually arrived? My take on this overall is yes, hence we're doing this episode, and it will come as no surprise to you that these robotics entrepreneurs feel the same way. But what was cool at FIRA USA was that companies were really open about how many units they currently have operating commercially, how much those units cost a customer, and how many working hours they've accomplished. So I have to say I was really impressed with that level of just openness in this part of the industry. Now, those of you who are in the US like I am might assume that we here are on the leading edge of adoption of autonomous technology, but that's actually not always the case. Robotics Plus co-founder and CEO Steve Saunders has been around agriculture and robotics for a long time in his home of New Zealand. He says after decades of farming and growing agricultural businesses there, he got into developing autonomous platforms as a need for his own businesses. They started their work in robotic fruit picking and port automation and have just launched their main new product, which is called Prosper, a fully autonomous multi-use vehicle that is a diesel-electric hybrid tractor. He sort of captures the overall sentiment of these ag robotics entrepreneurs when he says, we're still just at the very beginning.
Yeah, look, I think the robotics revolution in agriculture is just at the beginning. I think we've seen a lot of people come and go in the last few years, but I think those with the right focus are starting to come through, and we're starting to see adoption of these technologies. I think there's some great examples like Carbon Robotics and Gus and others that are really starting to get some traction, same with ourselves. So I think it is really at the forefront. I think when I'm out in the market, there's definitely the early adopter growers. There'll be the ones that follow close behind, and there's always the laggards.
And you mentioned a couple former podcast guests there, Carbon Robotics, just recently from episode 419, and then Gus back from episode 284. SwarmFarm Robotics co-founder Andrew Bate agrees that we're still in the early days, but not necessarily the very beginning. Also a farmer himself, he and his wife co-founded SwarmFarm back in 2010, so they've been at this for a while already with over 120 of their robots in the field that have done work across 5 million acres in Australia and have performed over 220,000 working hours. He says their robot's designed to be very simple, with only the things a farmer like himself would really need and actually use. He also said the 90 horsepower four-wheel drive robot is also modular in design, similar to Robotics Plus Prosper in that way, and that they're built for a farmer to repair themselves because he believes very strongly in right to repair. Andrew says the interest in the SwarmFarm robot is pairing well for farmers with other technologies that have already been adopted in Australia, like spot spraying.
It's interesting. The first reflection I'd have is in the Australian market, we're seeing huge uptake of autonomy and robotics. Like there's now more spot spray weed detection technology going up on board our robots than there is on tractors and sprayers in the Australian market. And I realise See & Spray's, new here in the North American market, but there's been companies providing that technology in Australia now for near 20 years, and Australia is the biggest adopter of spot spray technology globally. It has a really good product market fit in the Australian agricultural market. And farmers are now choosing to put that technology to work on their farms with autonomy. So for us, that's been a great achievement.
And I think now's probably a great time to mention that autonomy isn't just about autonomous units, although today we're mostly focusing on these types of autonomous units. It's also about bringing autonomy to implements, See & Spray being a perfect example. And in a future episode coming up this month, I am going to bring together a bunch of interviews on various types of weeding technologies I encountered at FIRA USA. So that is coming, more on See & Spray later, because that's actually one of them that I'll be profiling. But I digress. Back to today's episode. Ben Alfi has been around autonomy for a long time as well. His company, BlueWhite, doesn't sell a robotic tractor unit like SwarmFarm does or Robotics Plus does. Instead, they equip existing fleets with autonomous technology, allowing farmers to add autonomous capabilities to their existing equipment. They've also announced a partnership with New Holland that we'll talk about a little later in today's episode. But Ben calls what we're currently seeing right now a tipping point for deploying autonomy on the farm.
I've been around autonomy for more than 25 years. In the past, I was in charge of all the unmanned systems in the Israeli Defense Force. We see unmanned system happening, and we saw what happened when it gives scale, how it increased safety, how it increased capabilities. I believe we are at that tipping point right now here in agriculture. starts with the huge need. Kids don't know how to press a clutch anymore. So a huge need on making a safe environment for people to work in the farm, that they don't need to be near chemicals and they can operate at scale without being worried about their personal safety. We see the technology here available, and it's happening.
Now, I fully realize that any founder of a robotics or autonomy company is going to believe in their heart of hearts that the farm robotics revolution is here. That's why they started their companies, right? But there's also data and evidence to support this tipping point. BlueWhite has over 60,000 working hours on commercial farms with their technology. AgTonomy is somewhat newer to the scene, but they already have big paying accounts of their own in their target niche of wine grapes. Large growers like Gallo and Delicato and Treasury Wine Estates are deploying AgTonomy's technology in their large vineyards, which total collectively over 6,500 acres. Similar to BlueWhite, AgTonomy is an enabler of autonomy on the farm, not making proprietary units, but instead working with OEMs to enable them to bring autonomous capabilities to growers.
So one thing we really believe in at AgTonomy is show me versus tell me. One thing about the ag community is you can't just say you're going to do something and not follow through with it. You got to prove what you're doing. And we take a lot of pride in that. And that's why we've been out working in real farms, for over a year now. And we're a pretty young company doing a lot more advanced work than companies that are, 5 years older than us and have a lot more capital than us. So I think the key in providing solutions to farmers is to show those solutions working for real and not just say this is something that will happen in the future. So AgTonomy is very focused on the here and now, while keeping our eyes on the future. But that's really important in agriculture, is to show me.
So the proof that this robotics revolution is actually here and is actually happening is in the company's ability to show farmers that not only does the technology exist and does it work, but it can actually work profitably on real commercial farming operations. And that is partially the answer to my second question about this revolution, which is what's driving all this? And the first answer you're going to get from most people when you ask the question is, of course, labor. And I think that is by far the most common answer because it is generally true. Labor is a problem for many commercial farming operations, but it's also not really this monolithic thing. And also a lot of the early traction around adoption of this technology isn't exactly displacing a ton of labor. I'm going to pull on this thread a little bit later to try to tease apart some of the nuances there. But what is actually driving this ag robotics revolution? Labor, sure, but also, as farmer and SwarmFarm founder Andrew Bate will tell you, a vision for what it looks like to actually farm differently when the status quo just doesn't seem to be working.
I think, like many farmers out there, you got successful by farming more acres. I mean, farms have got bigger. As family members got involved in farming, you needed bigger farms to support everyone. We did what everyone else did, bought more farms, farmed more acres, ran more cattle, cropped more acres. And as we expanded, we bought bigger equipment, bought the biggest tractors we could get, we bought the biggest sprayers we could get, bought the biggest planters we could get. And we kind of grew like that. And we were really successful at it. I mean, we'd been benchmarked in the top of our peers in terms of farm performance on benchmarking. We expanded really aggressively and got really successful at farming. And then there was this kind of pivotal moment. We started buying some really big farming machinery to the point we actually bought a new plant. It was a new concept to market. And, we don't hold the current Guinness World Record, but the machine they built after us, the second machine, serial number 2, still holds the current Guinness World Record for the most acres planted with one planter in one day. So we were right up there, pushing the limits of farming. And the pivotal moment for me was while the ego got bigger and, we farmed more acres and we were more efficient and we were saving labor and doing all that stuff, our machines had got too heavy, they got too cumbersome because they're so big. When we were spraying, we're cutting huge wheel tracks across our paddock, causing huge amounts of soil compaction and damage. The booms weren't stable like they used to be when you're spraying with really big equipment, with more chemicals drifting off, we're wasting more. Even the planting technology we had, we were planting better crops and growing better crops. We had smaller equipment, but we were kind of on this hell-bent thing. We've got to get big. We've got to get efficient. We've got to buy more acres. We've got to buy bigger gear. It's bigger, faster. it's kind of been bred into us. I mean, since the tractor replaced the horse, it's about industrialising agriculture, going bigger, going faster, buy more acres. And for me, starting SwarmFarm was a step in the other direction. It's like, well, how do we farm better? Because all we're doing is trying to farm more acres here and get more acres per man per day. But what if we spin that around and say, well, how do we use technology to actually be better farmers? Because, we could see that there was this technology change coming with robotics, computer vision, big data. And big data's been in ag forever. It's done to death. Hasn't really delivered the change we wanted it to deliver. I was there. I mean, I remember when they first dropped selective availability off GPS and we could start yield mapping with a cheap receiver on our harvesters or combines. We had that there collecting all the yield data. But, our farming systems weren't changing and all we were doing was just getting bigger machines. So for me, robotics was this chance to launch into smaller machines that were lighter weight, that were lower impact, that were simpler. And it was a chance to start saying, well, what if we change the farming system? Can robotics change the way we put seed in the ground? Can robotics change the way we plan our crop rotations? Can we look at different ways of harvesting with technology and robotics? And that's what really got me excited.
And there are also some really big advancements on the other side of the equation, the technology that powers these solutions. Things like compute power and connectivity and AI all have enabled huge leaps in ag technology in recent years. These megatrends, as Andrew calls them, make today's offerings of robotics and automation miles ahead of where the industry was just a few years ago.
Even now, I mean, if you look at, ag tech and robotics, we're starting to see more and more solutions come to market, and there's been some big enabling factors there. I mean, certainly computer vision and GPUs went from sort of fringe to mainstream with NVIDIA's rising success. I mean, you've only got to look at the stock price of NVIDIA over the last sort of few years to watch, the
You saw that
change.
coming, right? You invested early?
I wish. Same with connectivity. I mean, we've always struggled with connectivity in agriculture. Elon's largely solved that now. And so that's come together really fast. And it wasn't that long ago we were whinging about connectivity. Now, provided you're happy enough to write a check, you can get what you need. So that's really propelled the robotics industry along, same even with artificial intelligence and AI. I mean, 18 months ago, most of us were pretty not bothered by AI. Now, all of a sudden, we're really interested in it. There's some really, really big megatrends that are hitting us now that are really enabling this. So I think that's, a big thing that's pushing this along now. So, the reality of where we were with robotics and what was available 2 years ago to what's available today is exponential. And, where we saw the first success was definitely in weeding technology. And that's where we could deliver that 1 + 1 = 3 equation was definitely in weeding. And, things like picking fruit, I mean, we're still evolving. I mean, there's not a lot of technology out there that's commercially picking fruit. We're talking earlier about apple picking, and there's companies working on it. And they're going to get there, and some are close, but we're still not quite there. And, even pruning and things like that, there's huge opportunities for robotics along that.
So this vision of autonomy bringing a new way to farm is compelling, and these megatrends are certainly providing some tailwinds for the technology. But when it really comes down to it, you always end up getting back to labor. That is, of course, the pain point, the catalyst, if you will, for what is getting a grower motivated to act now, which brings me to question number 3. So to recap here, the first one is, are we actually seeing a robotics revolution? And the second one is, what is powering this move towards autonomy? And the third question is this really a solution to the labor problem? In some cases, the labor problem, quote unquote, might mean availability. In other cases, it might mean just the cost of labor. In some cases, it might mean just a shortage of skill or expertise or the ability to execute a task consistently and efficiently over and over and over again, as often we have to do in examples like Andrew just mentioned with harvesting by hand or pruning by hand. But everywhere you go, there seems to be some labor-related problem that makes the current system feel unsustainable. But it's not as simple as just purchasing a machine and needing fewer people. Like everything in agriculture, it's more nuanced and complex than you might see on the surface. As a farmer and Robotics Plus founder, Steve Saunders knows too well all the costs and challenges associated with the labor problems. He sees the technology as part of the solution and also as a way to offer jobs that people get more excited about doing in the first place.
As a farmer myself, I know I need to go down this space. And I also think about the talent that's coming through. How do we how do we create the next generation of ag workers? And sitting on tractors in a spray environment or doing really mundane tasks is not an attractive job. The cost of labour is going up, the overtime rates, if it's too hot, you sit down and have a break. That cost is becoming very, very high for growers. And, how do we remain sustainable? And we're also really excited to see new young operators coming in that are really excited that, they can run this type of technology. So we're getting long-term staff members on ranches, sons coming in to start to play with these new technologies, which is super exciting to see. And we don't see it as the one big question I always get asked is you're getting rid of jobs. And we don't see that. What we see is, how to create better jobs and then how people can be deployed into more satisfying jobs within the orchard. And history would always tell you that automation has not reduced jobs, it's actually increased jobs over time.
And in conversation after conversation I've had at FIRA and beyond when it comes to ag robotics, the point was made clear. For these solutions to even be considered, they either have to have a clear labor savings in the short term, or at minimum, show how they could get more done with the same amount of labor. I found myself hearing the word labor tossed around so much, I started to get a little bit skeptical that the nuances behind the term quote-unquote labor problem were really being fully understood or appreciated, or that we were maybe just not all talking about the same problem. This is a nuance that I plan to tackle in an upcoming episode of this podcast, and I'm not questioning here whether or not there is a labor problem in general. I know there is, but I am questioning, number one, if we all mean the same thing when we say that there's a labor problem, and two, if autonomy really does enough to tackle the problem in the way that most farmers define it. More on that to come. But as Steve alluded to, it's not just about finding ways to farm without people or buying a machine and eliminating people's jobs. In fact, it's much more complicated. The most exciting visions of fully embracing autonomy on farms requires a whole different mentality and a different system. To optimize this new system would require not just a change in who is on the team, but also the way farmers decide to design their orchards or vineyards, for example, or maybe what genetics they use, or when and how they address pest disease and weed problems, and even what crops they might choose to plant. Here's Andrew Bate from SwarmFarm on how his farm has changed in Australia from embracing his technology.
Oh, look, definitely. I mean, definitely changing our crop rotations. We're definitely using a lot less pesticides now on our farm, and the soil compaction and the erosion's exponentially dropped. I mean, that's been the big one. I mean, we had some of the biggest gear out there, 15 to 20 years ago. Now we've got the smallest fleet out there, and I like that. It's pretty rewarding. And so really the opportunity with robotics is to slow down, to do things better. It just takes a little longer, and that's kind of how the whole equation works with SwarmFarm. It's smaller robots, lightweight, low power, they run more hours, and if you need more work done, you just have to deploy more of them. But the impact's huge because you don't have the soil compaction. You can do a better job at slow speed. I mean, and that's another good reflection, I think, in the precision weeding market. There's so many companies trying to develop weed detection technology that can run at 12 mile an hour because they say, farmers won't slow down, they've got to go at 12 mile an hour. Well, everyone said that in Australia 15 years ago, and then they realised that, you can detect weeds at 12 mile an hour, but you do a pretty crappy job. Because when you're spraying something and turning a nozzle on at 12 mile an hour, you get the wind shear and all the different things, and you don't actually get the droplets where you want them. So I think one of the things we discovered in the first sort of 5 years of weed detection technology was if you slow down, it works better. And so all of a sudden, farmers did choose to slow down. They slowed down and sort of went at that kind of 9 mile an hour range, which no one ever thought they would. And then now they're choosing to put it on robots and go down 6 mile an hour because it does an even better job again. And I see a lot of tech companies saying we've developed this technology, you can do 12 mile an hour or 15 mile an hour, and it's like, well, that's great, but actually the value proposition is actually better than that if you slow down. Mm-hmm. So some of the insight there we're seeing.
And slowing down to farm better is something that feasibly can be done economically if you have smaller, more affordable machines that can be deployed autonomously with multiple working in a field at one time. So you don't have to go big and fast in order to get everything done in time. And this willingness on the part of farmers to adapt their farming systems and the ability of these robotics companies to collaborate and think through where their technology might fit into the existing system is something Steve from Robotics Plus says is critical for the industry moving forward.
Robotics isn't going to solve every problem. And as a grower, I always look at fix my inefficiencies first, and then how do I apply automation on those inefficiencies? And I think growers have also, if they want automation, they want this to be easier, we have to adopt as growers to allow these technologies to work within the environments. So I think there's a dual role here that growers have to sort of adopt to some degree to allow automation to happen. And vice versa, the automation guys need to be really engaged with the growers to really understand the needs and how we do that. So that's why we sort of chose things like apple crops, because if you go up to Washington now or New Zealand or Australia, a lot of people are growing apples on V-trellis or vertical 2D systems. That's great for robots. I always have the saying, we train robots for perception. So you just imagine the same as your human eye. And if you can see it with your eye, then a robot's going to see it. But if you can't see it with your eye, well, a robot's not going to see it either. And if you expect a robot to go into some big jungle, it's never going to do it. The risks are too high in terms of we need to be able to see and avoid objects. We need to be able to see people. There's a safety aspect that we have to have around robots and automation as well.
But this big focus on labor is also what's leading a lot of these companies to focus on specialty crops, or what some might call high-value crops, because they're obviously much more labor intensive. Just like Steve and Andrew were farmers that wanted to solve their own problems, Tim Bucher of AgTonomy was a wine grape grower himself in California, which is what prompted him to apply his own technology background that he used in his day job to Trattori, his vineyard and winery in Northern California.
So at Trattori, I went no-till farming probably about 7 years ago or so. And so a lot of the emphasis went from spraying as the number one task pre and post harvest to mowing. And so mowing became a bigger deal. And as you know, if you don't use herbicides and if you can do mechanical weeding under the trees and under the vineyards, you have to do more passes. And so it's repetitive. And that's what makes automation very applicable, is if there are tasks that need to be repeated over and over again. And we are, as a company, AgTonomy, very focused on specialty crops. Some people call them permanent crops. Some people call them high-value crops. And there's a reason for that. Number one, there's more labor needed in those markets than in big ag, than in row crops. Right? The two of us could farm probably 1,000 acres of row crops, but the two of us could barely farm 100 acres of specialty crops. So there's a lot more labor intensity and a lot more labor pressure there. And that's ultimately why we started there. It's also where precision ag is actually needed. So if you and I did a GPS-based tractor on cornfields and we took out 100 corn stalks, it would be a bummer. But if we did something where we took out one citrus tree, it would be a bigger bummer. So these are much more valuable types of crops, and you got to be a lot more careful around them. And it really hasn't been until recently that technology has advanced to the point where we can do these kinds of things in these very, very, tight spacing, very precious crops around us as we're navigating through and doing those pre and post harvest work.
But that's not to say autonomy only makes sense in specialty crops like wine grapes. As you've already heard, Andrew at SwarmFarm took the opposite approach, starting in cereals, which is what he farms in Australia, and now years later, moving into row crops and specialty crops. But this brings us to our next question. Will farmers buy this? We've already shown traction amongst what I'll call the early adopters that are out there, but what's it going to take to make this mainstream? The short answer is if it's going to find its way onto the farm, especially in crops that have been experiencing tough economic times in recent years, which unfortunately is a lot of crops, it's going to take very clear immediate value. The labor savings has to be clear and significant. The efficiency gains have to really show up on the bottom line. And ideally, it might save costs in inputs or fuel. Robotics Plus is trying their best to check all of those boxes with Prosper, which they just launched this year. I think Steve's breakdown of the immediate ROI of this machine was a great example of what these numbers can look like on this type of equipment for growers.
And it's a diesel electric or a hybrid system. So we're able to gain 70% fuel efficiency. So really looking about around decarbonisation. But the great thing is the vehicle is fully electric. It's just powered by a diesel engine. So the engine just runs at 1600 RPM with a generator and creates the power. And we chose that pathway as battery tech is out. But, I liken it to saying you might have a Tesla car and you might be able to do 300 or 400 miles on a Tesla car, but put a trailer on the back with a ton and you'll probably only do 100 miles. And it's the same with ag equipment. Is when you put a tool on the back of the tractor unit, it draws a lot more power. And, for the infrastructure, a lot of farmers don't have the power infrastructure with the scale they are to have multiple electric vehicles with batteries being charged on a regular basis all day long. So, for us, we thought the hybrid system was a really good approach. We were getting the real benefits of an electric platform, but we're not having to have the big power grid and the chargers, and we're reducing the fuel use by 70%. So, when we look at what we're trying to do with Prosper, it's about one operator can operate multiple machines. So we've got the labor saving, we've got 70% fuel savings. The spray technology we have on our Q series sprayers, you can reduce chemical use by 30%. And then maintenance-wise, we have no hydraulics, we have no grease, we have no brakes, clutches, cabs. There's no seat steering wheels on this machine. It's a fully autonomous vehicle.
This general area of the economics of these machines is something that I think could use a lot more attention. And I'm not just saying like, how much money am I going to save and how much is it going to cost me to calculate a basic ROI? Like that could pretty easily be done. But I would have loved to see more presentations, more research posters at a place like FIRA from economists looking at the data, not just of ROI, but also of the economic headwinds or tailwinds driving farmer decisions, whether or not to purchase this technology. I don't know, maybe FIRA can add more of that in the future, but I also fully appreciate that this is a nascent part of the industry and there isn't probably a lot of ag economists working in this area quite yet, but something I would definitely love to see. I also want to credit Western growers, though. This year, they've started doing ag tech financial case studies of actual users who are willing to share real numbers from their operation once they've purchased this technology. The first report came out just earlier this year looking at carbon robotics, and I know they have another one coming soon looking at Stout. I'm going to leave a link in the show notes for where you can go find those. Hopefully that Stout one will be available soon. It's easy, especially in a place like FIRA, to fall in love with the products here, to see the robots in action and realize how cool this stuff is. But I think more work on the economics of this emerging field is definitely needed. And as you know, if you've been listening to my episodes lately, I've been on an economics kick, which is probably going to last, for the foreseeable future, if not forever. But this is also an area that's difficult to capture because the real value of adopting autonomy might be the long-term gains from approaching the farm differently. How do we calculate, for example, the ROI of more consistent precision, of more enjoyable jobs, of less compaction and erosion, of more time spent on higher value strategic tasks? Those are difficult ROIs to calculate. The shift toward creating new farming systems and changing agriculture is exactly what motivates Andrew Bate of SwarmFarm, and it's that long-term vision that's a little bit more difficult to articulate the ROI on.
We've got around 120 robots running across Australia now with customers. And, we're seeing a real shift in farming systems. I mean, we started the company to bring new farming practices and change agriculture. We didn't start to automate agriculture or, try and automate a task. And farmers using our robots are getting out of bed and they're making a different decision to their neighbour, planting their crops differently. They're changing their rotations. They're changing the way they control their weeds. And it's a real success. I mean, it's really satisfying to see that the first seeds of change starting to emerge now from what we've been doing. I like to say it's a 1 + 1 = 3 type equation that we're kind of doing here. And I know it drives our engineers mad when I say this because they say 1 + 1 doesn't equal 3, but it does. So, we've got all this cutting edge technology starting to come out in ag tech now. And when you apply it in a farming system, you start to see benefits to that. So, when you combine things like spot spray technology or computer vision based spraying with autonomy, you get a result that's better than the two pieces of technology on their own. Even added together, you get a multiplication factor. We're seeing farmers that are now growing crops and rotations they weren't growing before because of robotics combined with smart technology on board.
But to get to that vision, to make it a reality for more farmers across the globe, there's got to be a compelling value proposition and a realistic way to get these tools to the farmer and support them along the way. And these guys all know this. It's no coincidence that every company we're featuring here today has a very collaborative approach. In the case of like SwarmFarm and Robotics Plus, they're making their platform flexible, adaptable, and easy to integrate with a variety of toolmakers. Here's Steve again from Robotics Plus.
But with our modular platform, we have the ability to scale that platform up now to bigger size platforms or smaller platforms with different size tanks and different spray equipment. And with the tools, we like to partner with existing tool makers. So, a lot of growers have their favorite equipment or their favorite sort of manufacturer of a tool. So we tend to work with the tool makers to, for example, our sprayer is a relationship with Croplands from Australia and New Zealand, who have been building sprayers for over 50 years. They're now manufacturing the spray unit that goes on our machine. We work together as a team because there's an integration piece, and we've also taken their technology, being hydraulic, to making it electric. And that's been a great partnership. Now they're also now interested in how they can take that electric and put that on tow behind tractors, for example. So those relationships are really important. So, we're all about a partnership model as well. And from the grower, from the tool maker, the distributor.
In the case of BlueWhite, they announced this year a partnership with New Holland to collaborate on distribution, manufacturing, and integration of BlueWhite's autonomous solutions for New Holland tractors across North America. This gives farmers local sales and support to make their New Holland tractors autonomous, and also gives BlueWhite a great distribution partner to scale their business.
We are very excited about that. The values of BlueWhite are fellowship, love of the land, and innovation. And fellowship means that just like we have here dealerships and growers who have been working here for more than a century, also we have companies that have been here more than a century. So we want to blend into the ecosystem. We are not trying to be a tractor company. We're bringing a very knowledgeable tractor company with us being knowledgeable about autonomy. And now we can create an amazing product together. So this is how I'm looking at it. All the entities are joining together, focused mainly on the grower, making sure that they are happy and they are able to do it. And we're learning a lot. So we're very excited about this relationship. We learn and we use it as the ability to blend in and create simple solutions that you don't need to pick and choose from all kinds of entities. You have one-stop shop, the dealer next to you, the person that you've been with for quite a while.
And AgTonomy is also focused on working with OEMs, or original equipment manufacturers. They announced a big partnership of their own early this year with Bobcat. Here's AgTonomy's Tim Bucher again, and keep in mind that this was recorded back in January, so fresh off this Bobcat announcement.
So being a farmer, I have trusted equipment providers. I used, green tractors, blue tractors, orange tractors. The dealer network is super important. The service network is super important because this equipment is for your livelihood. So knowing that and having been a farmer my whole life, I didn't want to build a robot or build a tractor, right? These are things that these trusted sources of farmers have been doing for, decades and in some cases over a century. So the whole idea was to help these OEMs accelerate their digital transformation. And by the way, it's not just tractor OEMs, it's also implement OEMs, right? There's a lot of technology that's now coming into the implement because you can't take the tractor alone. Nobody goes tractoring, they go and do some work. So you need to look at it as more of a solution than just, automate the tractor and you're done. That's not the case at all. So We have a partnership with Bobcat, who is well known in compact tractors, actually one of the biggest global compact tractor company in the world. And they have construction products, they have ag products, they have warehouse logistics products, they have land maintenance products. And so you will find us embedded in the first vehicle that was announced, which was the AT450X. It was announced just last week at CES, and it was shown at the show. So agriculture is making a big presence at the Consumer Electronics Show over the last couple of years. And it's been really interesting to see that sort of presence and transition that's happening there.
And Bobcat is only the part of the story of AgTonomy's progress. On a post on their website shortly after that interview with Tim, they list other partnerships with companies like On Target Spray Systems, Clemens Technologies, KCI Manufacturing, and Thiessen Tillage Equipment, all partnering to power them with autonomy. And this brings me to the last question we'll cover here today, which is, where does all of this lead? What is next for the ag robotics revolution? If you ask Tim Bucher, it's all about moving toward his vision of the smart farm.
You know, it's really interesting. I reflect on our homes. As you recall, there was this term called the smart home that came about, 15, 20 years ago. And, we kind of used to have these manual thermostats and all this stuff. And I don't think there's any home now that doesn't have some kind of smartness in it, right? Whether it's the, front doorbell cameras and the security systems and the thermostats and all kinds of things, music, etc. And that took, a while for it to transition. On the farming side, we're seeing an incredible appetite for turning these farms into smart farms. So that doesn't mean just, these vehicles and implements, but there are other aspects too. And certainly low Earth orbit satellite companies are enabling, connectivity in all these rural areas, much better than cellular coverage, for example. And there are, different things of GPS corrections and other kinds of services that can make the work that you're doing a lot more precise. So, I think you're seeing the same thing that happened in homes, where we went from a home to a smart home, happening in farms. And it's not just the big players doing this. The small players actually have to do it more. So it's a matter of making the technology more approachable, both in terms of price point as well as ease of use. And that's something that we've learned a lot at AgTonomy in our testing. We have actually been in paid pilots for over a year now. And 2024 is shaping up to be an even bigger year for us in terms of getting these solutions into the hands of real farmers.
So as you're hearing, the technology is here, and the compute power is here, and the connectivity is here, and the AI is here. So what does it take to get autonomy in agriculture to the next level? Ben Alfi from BlueWhite says it's all about proving out the efficiency gains and the longevity of these systems on the farm.
So the tech is there. It's supposed to be there, and we're getting there, I'd say, on the safety level. So we have safe autonomous vehicles running. On the quality level, the tech is there, meaning we see tractors, autonomous tractors running, and we're not just tractoring, quality spraying or herbiciding, things like that. And the next level for scale is making sure that the efficiency, downtime, things like that are happening. So we are now working on our next generation of hardware together with top manufacturers, how to bring your best edge compute that can give you all the information at real time, and and under a lot of lesson learned that we have from environmental conditions and other things like that, so it will not break and will be there for you for years. So this is one thing. How we are doing onboard and training to make it very easy, so it's not a month or two of learning how to drive autonomous vehicle. How do you learn how to drive an autonomous vehicle in one day? We accomplished the ability how to transform a regular tractor to autonomous in 7 to 8 hours with a dealership transforming this vehicle. So all kinds of things of economy of scale. So you will see it in every household or every farm.
And the question I asked everyone I spoke with is, what's keeping that from happening? What are the bottlenecks or constraints that are keeping autonomy from really breaking through to mainstream adoption? For Andrew Bate at SwarmFarm, it all comes back to truly understanding how this new way of farming fits into the current farming system and how that system can slowly be changed over time to fit the new capabilities these robots can bring.
Australian farmers have learned a lot about how to deploy that technology really well in their farming system. And I think as we're starting to see more tailored technology, obviously green on green, we're seeing mechanical chipping type technology now. We're starting to see laser weeders hitting the forefront of agriculture. We've now got to relearn the agronomy about how to apply this really well. And robotics is just part of that journey. And so I think that's probably the bottleneck. I think it's understanding how this is applied, how it makes a difference for your farm, what it's going to change. It's not about we're going to park that thing up, we're going to use this. It's how does this fit into the farming system and truly understanding that so we can deploy it properly. I think that's the biggest bottleneck. And there's going to be other enablings on this as well. So what we're going to see, right now we breed plants to suit the technology we've got. Like if you look at something like cotton, cotton's bred to be picked by a John Deere cotton picker. But when that changes to robotic harvesting, all of a sudden the geneticists are going to have to go back. The plant breeders are going to have to go back through the bin of all the stuff they threw out over the last 15 years and drag it back out again and see if it's got a fit, because as we start to see new robotic ways of harvesting crops, we're going to need genetics to match that. So it's going to be pretty interesting to watch what happens.
Very interesting indeed. Some really exciting times ahead for the future of agriculture. I thoroughly enjoyed each and every one of these conversations. To Andrew Bate, Steve Saunders, and Ben Alfi, thank you so much for taking time during FIRA USA to talk to me. To Tim Bucher, sorry I missed you, Tim. I think you were at Sabanto's dunk tank when I came by looking for you. But thanks for the interview earlier this year. It fit in really nicely with this episode. To summarize a few of my thoughts on the current state of autonomy in agriculture, I absolutely think it's here and it's here to stay. The tech is here, the economics are getting there, and I agree with Andrew that the farming system fit is likely what's going to take the longest, because these machines do open up new paradigms for how to farm profitably and sustainably over the long term. The labor question is one I still want to dive into more. To be blunt, it kind of turned me off to hear all the pitches that basically say, hey, labor is a problem for every farmer, so here's a robot. It just seems to gloss over a lot of the nuances behind this quote unquote labor problem. Something I definitely want to dig into more in future episodes to really understand where and how the pain of these problems exists and what it looks like to incorporate autonomy onto the farm to alleviate them. Another observation is that the clear path most autonomy companies are taking is some form of weed management. I mentioned this earlier. It seems like that's the obvious starting point for most of them, and for that reason, I'm going to dedicate a whole episode to weed management solutions that I interacted with at FIRA USA, and that's coming up. I was actually going to do these two episodes back to back, but frankly, there's so much work that I'm going to space them out a little bit. So stay tuned for that. I hope you subscribe to this show, and we'll hear that episode in the coming weeks. Lastly, it's clear to me that there's still more work to be done to support commercialization efforts of ag technology. This was really apparent to me at FIRA USA, especially hardware and especially companies that may not fit into traditional VC models. I'm still not sure what the answer is there, but as the tech continues to get more and more accessible, we need more customer-focused companies that can profitably commercialize all of it. I did a few interviews on that while I was in Woodland there for this event, and I'll be putting together a third episode from the event on that. So I've got my work cut out for me editing that together, but I do think it's worth sharing because it's an important part of the equation here that I wouldn't want to overlook. I highly recommend attending FIRA USA in the future if you ever get the chance to do so. The demonstrations themselves are worth the price of admission, plus you get some top-notch people to interact with. I really, really enjoyed it. I want to make it an annual trip if I can, and something tells me it's just going to keep getting bigger. All right, sorry this one went so long. Thanks as always for your time and your attention. I do not take it lightly. I'll be back next week with another story of ag innovation.